Hello and welcome to the churchmemo.com podcast. Today we are very excited to bring you an episode with my good friend Kyle Wilkinson. Kyle is on staff at the Summit Church in Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina. They are a multi-site church. They have 9 campuses, some of them permanent, some of them mobile. Kyle is at a mobile location. It's the Chapel Hill campus. He serves as a worship leader there, also as an elder, and he also serves with other worship leaders to help grow them and mentor them spiritually. So I'm really looking forward to hearing Kyle's perspective on dealing with the coronavirus pandemic, how things may have changed for him, how they may have stayed the same, what he's enjoying during this time, what he's learning during this time. And without further ado, let's jump right into our conversation with Kyle Wilkinson. Well, hey, Kyle, how are you doing?
I'm good, Wayne. How are you? It's good to see you.
Yeah, man, doing good. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy week to join us here on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
This coronavirus disruption has us all making some crazy adjustments. I know you guys at the Summit have been using video streaming for quite some time, but how has everything changed for you kind of in general?
Well, first, just want to acknowledge that coronavirus has changed things for everyone. Right. I don't know a single person that hasn't been affected by the pandemic. Everyone's normal has been disrupted. Nothing's normal anymore, and everybody's trying to figure out adjustments. Yeah. For me personally, it means I'm mostly sitting on my couch on Sunday mornings with my family, which is new. That hasn't happened in 10 years, and so that's quite odd as compared to my normal 6:30 a.m. load-in time. And another big change for me, and I think a lot of other people in the Summit, is learning how to be a stay-at-home dad and still do ministry at the same time. With my daughter, I have a 2-year-old daughter at the house, so I can't neglect my responsibilities of father. So I have to honor those responsibilities of father and still learn to do ministry around that. So sometimes I have to put a pause on the ministry responsibilities so that I can really lock in and pay attention to my daughter and care for her well. But I'm still trying to fit in those ministry responsibilities. And I think all of our staff is trying to figure out that rhythm of how to be faithful in our family and yet faithful to fulfill our ministry responsibilities. When it comes to our church streams online, our streams have typically gone out from our broadcast campus where JD, our pastor, is preaching, and there's a team there that is normally singing and leading worship for our weekend gatherings, and we broadcast that service. But a big thing that we've been doing now with our services online is we have this awareness that people are sitting in their living rooms with their families, watching this music and a sermon. And so we really try to engage in a way that allows people to best get engaged sitting in a living room with 1 to 5 people. So we're working to make it feel intimate, like they can participate with, a mom and a dad and some kids. We also try to incorporate some kids songs and videos and a little kids guide for kids to follow along. So we're trying to make these more friendly to families on these services on the weekend. And a lot of effort goes into making that really helpful. And a lot of effort goes into thinking through all these pieces so that when we stream these weekend services, they can be helpful to people. We still do a lot of the same things like singing, praying, preaching, although we haven't quite figured out how to do virtual baptism or communion yet. So we'll let you know how that works out. But, everything's changed and we're having to kind of figure it out as we go. And I think we're starting to settle into a rhythm now, which is really good.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
So it's a big part of it. Are you, you said you weren't loading in at 6:30. So you guys are pre-recording your services?
Yeah. So on a normal weekend, half of our campuses at the Summit, about half of them are mobile sites where we load in and set up. And a lot of our load-in services start at 6:30. And then our other half are permanent sites where there's not a load-in. But when it comes to our live recordings, We are recording those on Wednesday, and then we live stream them and do chats with them on Facebook Live and YouTube and on our website, summitchurch.com. So we do pre-recording, but we put them up on live platforms and do live chats as we play our recordings.
Sweet. That's awesome. Yeah. That's awesome.
We try to be really intentional too, as people are chatting and connecting and joining in. We try to be really intentional too about giving people who are new or seeking help. There's lots of different links and things we share in the chat to help people connect to the summit, even as we're in this time of quarantine. So we're still trying to help people connect to the body of Christ, even through our online platforms.
Oh, nice. Is there anything you guys are learning that might be helpful for other churches out there?
Yeah, I think maybe something that I'll share is one thing we've been talking about is called the 5 C's. They're really the mission that we're having during this pandemic. And it really helps to try to paint a picture of what ministry should look like in this season where nothing is normal. So the 5 C's that our church has identified that we want to major on is caring, communicating, content, connecting, and community. So caring, I'll kind of walk through little pieces of each of these. Caring, reaching out to every person on our membership roster through calls, texts, and emails. We specifically are calling and reaching out to those who are the most vulnerable. And then each of our elders at the summit, and especially at Chapel Hill campus, is paired with a small group leader. So for me, I have 3 small group leaders that I'm paired with as one of our campus elders. And so 3 small group leaders, 3 small groups. Those small group leaders and everyone in that small group is under my care. So I am texting, emailing, calling those people on my roster, and also jumping in on their virtual small groups for each group once in the month of April. So all of the pastors across the summit are trying to be really intentional about how we reach out for people and care for people, as well as being really intentional about the benevolence we offer people who are in need in this season.
Yeah.
Another big thing is communicating. We use our social media platforms, but we also have some rhythms of emailing so that everybody is up to date with what's going on in the church. There's a big push for content, the 3rd C. We're generating a lot of content on our website to help people grow during the pandemic. One big resource our church put together was Don't Waste Your Quarantine. It's a document to help people think through how to engage with God and continue to grow as a disciple of Jesus, even when they're at home. The 4th one was connecting. I'm actually on a team of people that has been working to figure out how to connect the people who are disconnected at the summit to community. That's people who've been around who have never served before or tithed or never been in a small group. That's for people who joined us at the beginning of the year in January. And even for people who joined us new online, we're trying to think through creative ways to help connect those people at the church who are disconnected to community so that they're not completely isolated from the body of Christ. And that, which leads us to the 5th one, community. We're prioritizing small groups, continuing to gather online and giving them resources, resourcing our small group leaders for online meetings, also doing some Facebook Live and Zoom meetings with our church and our volunteers for the purpose of fellowship and prayer. So like, for instance, for Good Friday, we're doing online prayer meetings for each of our campuses. And those Facebook Live prayer meetings are led by the campus staff at each campus.
Nice.
So those 5 C's of connecting: caring, communicating, content, connecting, and community.
Yeah, cool. I really like what you said there about don't waste your quarantine. I'm going to have to look at that resource. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really helpful.
It's real tempting, right, to say, well, they put the country on pause, so I'm just going to be on vacation for the next however long, and
Absolutely.
Yeah, so how do we stop that?
Well, I think there's when you have a quarantine, one thing I've been thinking a lot about is how when life was normal, a lot of people I talk to are, oh, I'm so busy. I can't catch a breath. I can't take a break. And then everything is paused. Everything stops. And then everyone's at home. And now people are, what am I supposed to do with my time? Well, you were complaining about being busy before.
Right.
Now all your plans are canceled and you have great time to spend with family, to spend with the Lord, to learn something new, to prioritize things that you feel like you've been missing. I think there's opportunity. And I think this don't waste your quarantine idea really helps us see the opportunity we have to grow as disciples of Jesus.
Amen. Amen. Hey, so when this quarantine ends, do you see the church going back to normal or back to the way things were before? Or do you think this has kind of set us towards a course of new normal? Or how do you see this playing out?
I'm not sure. There are some things I hope that never change about the church.
Right.
And hopefully some other things that will change. I hope that we as churches, as pastors, ministers, whatever, your role is in ministry, always focus on being God exalting, Christ-centered, spirit-filled, and teaching the Bible. I always hope that we will keep the gospel central to all we do, the good news that Jesus lived and died for our sins and rose again. And in him, we can have life and be forgiven and be reconciled to God. I hope those things never change about the church. Mm. However, I'm hopeful that this season of coronavirus and being quarantined and social distancing reminds us how desperately we need one another. It's a privilege for us to gather in community to worship God. In America, we're a mostly unpersecuted church. We don't have to fear for our lives when we gather to worship God. That's not the case for believers all around the world in communities that are hostile to the gospel. In an overwhelming majority of cases in the United States, you will not die for gathering with other Christians. And yet, we treat it so flippantly and we take it for granted. I hope that people can see the gift it is to gather as a church, and I hope that they'll begin to cherish it. One thing I've been thinking a lot is that most pastors in our communities, in our churches, myself included, we've had probably more phone calls, emails, and texts in the last month than maybe in the last 12 months.
Oh, wow.
So I think it's easy for pastors to become very task-driven, production-oriented, initiation, like initiatives. Like, let's create this initiative, let's do this task, let's get this checklist done, and really neglect the personal connections, calling, reaching out to people in their church. And so I would love to see myself and pastors at the summit and pastors across the nation and world really getting back to the personal connection, prioritizing connecting with people, having relationships with people over products, over tasks, over initiatives. So, we all like to do something. It's like when this all hit, everybody was like, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do? And often it's really easy to create some type of program. All right, let's create a program. Than it is to simply be with people. I hope we refocus on being with people and making ourselves available to people. So I hope there's some things that never change, but I hope we can really begin to prioritize relationships as we move forward.
Man, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we have time for one more question, Kyle. So if there was anything you could say to other churches or church workers out there who maybe are feeling overwhelmed with what's going on or are struggling just a little bit, what would you say to encourage others?
Yeah, I think there are two things that come to mind. The first is to find the gift in the disruption. There's a unique opportunity for each person in this season of change. For me, I get to have an unprecedented amount of time with my daughter. And I'm making the most of every moment. Every moment. We're going for walks. We're playing with sticks. We're digging holes. We're playing with water. That's a gift from God. She's 2, and I've never had this amount of time with her. And I doubt I ever will again. So I'm making the most of that opportunity. So my question to anyone who might be listening is, what is the gift that God has given you in this season of disruption? Make the most of that opportunity. Nice. The second thing I think about is that pastors are called for times like this. While we all want to do something to help, It seems that right now the most helpful thing we can do is pick up the phone, call someone, and pray for them. A shepherd is called to care for the sheep. I think of a verse in John 10. I'll read it if that's okay. It's John 10, 11 through 16. And this is what Jesus says. He says, I'm the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. He who is a hired hand and not a shepherd, who does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and flees. And the wolf snatches them and scatters them. He flees because he's a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father. And I lay down my life for the sheep. And I have other sheep that are not of this fold. I must bring them also, and they will listen to my voice. So there will be one flock and one shepherd. Jesus doesn't run when he sees trouble coming. In fact, Jesus was faithful to defeat our greatest enemies, sin and death, by taking it onto his own shoulders and by dying the death that we deserved. Jesus is the one true shepherd of the people of God. And Jesus has placed under shepherds over the people of God to faithfully watch over his people on his behalf. Let's not be like the hired hand who runs at the sight of trouble and cares nothing for the sheep. Let's be like Jesus, who lays down his life for the sheep to the glory of God.
Man, that is good. That is good. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing that, Kyle. And thank you so much for being on with us on the podcast today. Always a pleasure to talk to you and catch up with you, man.
Thank you, Wayne. So grateful to be on here today and great to see you.
All right, my friend. Have a good one.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. I just want to say thank you so much to Kyle for taking time out of his busy week to be with us here on the churchmemo.com podcast. Always great talking with Kyle. And what a great perspective from a multi-site church. I really enjoyed his comment about now is the time to dig into the relationships and really grow the people that God has given you. Become their spiritual leader. Lean into this time and be the good shepherd. Be the good shepherd. Do not run away as the hired hand does. Do not cower. Do not back down in this time of coronavirus pandemic. Now is your time to shine. And I pray that you will have the strength, the courage, the mercy, and the grace that you need to grow the people that God has given you. Go lead your church as well.